Hey friends, we are witnessing populist movements on both the right, the MAGA movement, and the left, which is this whole neo-Marxist move that we're seeing not only in New York, but now in Seattle with the election of another openly socialist person. Where's this coming from? Well, it comes from a great discontent in the hearts of the normal person who feels like this elite class rigs all the rules and all of that for their own personal benefit and certainly doesn't care about the average person. We're also seeing a growth in socialism, but socialism is a mirage, and we're going to talk about 10 reasons why socialism just doesn't work and doesn't line up with a biblical Christian worldview. I think it's going to be a really, really helpful podcast today. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Here's your week of 30 minutes of fun and inspiration. We're not going to let them down, Drew. We can't. But we got to start off with some inspiration because every week, Matthew and I have to indulge the fact that the Bears won again and a last-second field goal. We're in first place, and this is a sign and a wonder. I think it's a physical sign of what God's trying to do in the spirit. What do you think, man? I mean, this is truly like on the edge of like wow miracle. This has not happened in Chicago for a long time. So anyway, all right, moving on beyond them. I think
it's dangerous to parallel the Bears' trajectory with the kingdom of God, but we'll go for this week.
Yeah,
anybody else want to take that bet?
Border on heresy, but I'm not going to really hit that point hard. I'll back off. But I do want to share some great stuff just to kick us off. First of all, our 21 days of prayer has been going phenomenally. This is our last week. We end on Saturday, and then Sunday, of course, we've been preaching through the Lord's Prayer. And this past Sunday, as you know, I was in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, and verse 8 gives us this promise from God. God will generously provide all you need. And then, which is the purpose, then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. So that was the word from the Lord. And I love it when, sometimes you preach a message and you hope that somebody actually listens to it. And then more than just listen to it, put it into practice. So I had this text waiting for me this morning. I won't reveal any names, but it's really exciting. Good morning, Pastor Ron. Wanted to share a great story. When I was in second service yesterday, thinking about the message, my sister popped into my head. The more I thought of her, the more I thought she needed help. I have been very blessed as of late in business and sent her $200 via Venmo. My sister messaged me right away and was very thankful. I told her I loved her and that God blessed me, so I am blessing you. A few hours later, my mom calls me and tells me the $200 was exactly the amount that the sister needed to get her brakes fixed, and she didn't have the money. He said, I had no idea. The number just popped into my head, and I sent it. I love those kind of stories because I even shared third service that I really felt like God was going to do that very thing, give somebody a burden, or that God would answer a need. Like if we prayed for $127.32, because that was what our NIP school bill was, that God would provide in a very specific way just to demonstrate his fathering. So I love those kind of stories. God's word is true, and what a great promise, and I love it. The other thing I love is not just the money or breaks, but it gave a brother a chance to tangibly love a sister and to specifically say, I love you and I care about you. You're on my heart. And so it's beautiful how generosity works.
Yeah, and I think, giving to the Lord doesn't need anything from us, but when you give in faith to your sister, you're essentially giving of yourself. You're surrendering yourself to the Lord. So that is, in a way, given to the Lord, even though you're not tangibly giving it to God.
Absolutely. And I want to juxtapose this wonderful example with a really lousy example of how the secular world or secular economics, godless economics works. I want to see if Living Stones can hire Nancy Pelosi. What do you think? I hear she's resigning this year after being in Congress for most of her life. I think she started when she was 3. No, I'm kidding. She didn't, but almost 3. And so this is crazy. According to a House Speaker or House let me say this again. No, as of November 8th, 2025, a report exposed House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's amassing over, ready for this, $130 million in stock profits, and this translates to a staggering 16,930% return. Now, I'm going to talk to my financial planners, and I want to see if we can get anywhere near 16,930% return on my stock portfolio. Obviously, this doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is not normal. The best traders on the world don't have records like this. This is a perfect example of insider trading. She had timely buys on tech firms like NVIDIA, pre-COVID subsidies and sales in energy stocks before the regulations hit that the Congress was imposing, raising fresh insider trading allegations amid Trump's ethics reform. So here again, you look at stuff like this, and she's trying to say they're just trying to get me. It's all politics. But this is clearly, I think, what most people are really sick and tired of is the insider trading and the corruption and the elitism that, we're talking in our podcast today about a lot of these populist movements that we talked about. I think the populist movements are when your normal person just gets sick and tired of this kind of garbage, where instead of somebody getting elected to actually serve the American people, to put Americans first, to think about America, to love America. This is a perfect example of people who use the system, rig the system for their own personal benefit. And we're sitting out here going, if we did that, we would be sitting in Sing Sing penitentiary for the rest of our lives. But they keep getting away with this kind of stuff. And then you wonder why we had, the MAGA movement on the right and why we're seeing these socialistic movements emerging on the left. That, as you talked about in our pre-podcast, are really signs of populism on either side of what we might call extremes. Well, I don't know what I would call MAGA extreme, but your take.
Yeah, there's ebbs and flow of history. There's flow towards elitism. People worship their kings and emperors and pharaohs, and they worship the elites because they're the one who's disseminating wisdom and knowledge and enriching all of us. And then it swings the other way when people recognize the elites are corrupt and they are self-serving. They're not really there serving for the people. I think the advent of social media and independent media, because traditional media have been the gatekeeper for, this is not about just Democrats, it's Democrats and Republicans, because they're just as bad. They're very elitist, both parties. And the traditional media has been gatekeeper for them for a long time, protecting what they're doing. But with rise of independent media and social media, people are more aware of that divide, and Trump kind of exposed that. I mean, there's people who think Trump's part of the elite, and there's argument towards that too. But the point is the attack on Trump kind of revealed even more just the elitism. So right now there's a populist swell going throughout the whole world. We saw what happened in Mexico recently.
Was it Argentina? I think too.
Middle America or Latin America country, whatnot. And again, it's people who are sick and tired of this thing. Now, populism could become very dangerous, as we've seen in the past, in history too. And even what's going on in New York City with the revolt. So what we were talking about is, on the right, you have the Republican Party, who is seen as the elite, GOP grand old party, who's kind of in power. And then MAGA comes to disrupt that and became very popular. And now you got the response on the left. This is my right, but the left, you got the traditional Democrat Party, and now you have the socialist wing, the Madanis, the AOCs, that's the socialistic wing of the populism of the left, who's starting to disrupt. I mean, Chuck Schumer he's
unbeatable, right?
He's not running anymore or something. I don't know that's a rumor or it's true, because people keep saying AOC is going to take his spot. So
now there's been a mutiny among the Democratic Party, again led by the populist left movement, that are saying they need a change in leadership. But even some established Democratic voices are saying that. So it's amazing how they're kind of cannibalizing themselves.
Well, much like remember the Tea Party, now MAGA. So it's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah.
So it's interesting whether the old brands are going to emerge. Like what we're hearing from the socialists, the Democratic Socialists, is the Democratic Party is just a vehicle to get them to their next destination. Yeah. As soon as they get there, they're throwing the car away.
Oh, they don't care about
they don't care about what the Democratic Party has traditionally stood for. And so that's a party that is having a massive identity crisis. I think the Republican side is equally having some shaking going on. I don't think it's as profound as what's happening with the Democrats right now, with no agenda other than hate Trump. Although, as we said, the socialists have a very, very clear agenda, whereas your normal Democrats don't seem to have anything in common right now except hating Trump.
Yeah, I would say the Republican Party, outside of Trump, because Trump is enacting a lot of policies that's not traditionally Republican policy, like tariffs.
Yeah.
So I would say the tariffs, at least from his standpoint, is kind of more of a MAGA policy of like American resurgence.
And we still haven't nailed down true conservatism, which is getting our fiscal house in order.
Yeah, that hasn't been dealt with.
The deficits just keep going up.
So that hasn't been dealt with, which that would be considered traditional. I mean, I'm not saying what's right. I'm just saying this is just very interesting because just like MAGA is disrupting the right, socialism is disrupting the left.
Yeah.
But there is the socialistic disruption on the left could become very toxic and become very, very dangerous. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, it didn't just happen in New York City. We also saw Seattle electing a socialist mayor who her platform included expanding DEI programs, defunding the police as if we didn't learn enough from Portland and other inner cities, implementing universal basic income, which means everybody, whether you're a hard worker or not, whether you went and got more training or developed your skills or not, everybody's going to get a basic, almost like a minimum wage life income, which someone's going to pay for that, which is, again, in socialism never seems to work. And what conservatives are warning is that her policies are going to deepen dependency on the government and erode family structures, which is exactly what happens when socialism and those kind of policies are implemented. This was an interesting article from the Daily Signal, Mike Gonzalez. He was saying that after Mamdani won, he gave his acceptance speech, and you look at who he's quoting. He quoted Eugene Debs, who was the Socialist Party of America founder over 100 years ago, who quote, said, "The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity." So this is all this utopian, socialistic, Marxist garbage that has never worked. And to quote, you're not quoting founding fathers, you're quoting overt Marxists in your speech, which is scary. But this is the one that's really scary. He said, again, I quote, "We will prove there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about," which is a fancy poetic way of saying we're going to embrace totalitarianism, because this is saying that if there's no problem too big for the government to solve and no issue too small for the government to get its hands in, then basically the government is controlling every aspect of our lives. And that is the definition of totalitarian government, is this massive, octopus that has its tentacles in everything. And that's exactly the vision that he's casting, for the largest city in America, which is really, really concerning. You and I talked about the fact that when God gets smaller, government gets bigger. I like what our friend Bill Federer said in his book on socialism. He outlined the nature of the progressivism. He talks about how the Pilgrims had a covenant under God. When the Enlightenment folks came along, they developed a social contract with a very, very distant God. Then came the French revolutionaries, who had a social contract with no God. And then we have Marxism, where the state becomes God. So it's interesting that evolution there. I'm wondering, we have seen in America an embrace of kind of modernism, post-Enlightenment modernism, belief that science and rationality and reason could solve all of man's problems. Apart, we didn't quite throw God completely out, but he was certainly put to the back of the bus. Of course, that only lasts for so long, and then you have just overt atheism, which is what we see a lot from the left. And then that sets us up for Marxism, where we actually look, as Mamdini said, we look to the state to basically be God in our lives, to solve all of our problems and to make our world a better place and to take care of all of our needs. And we're like, in some of these urban areas, that's exactly where we're moving. It's going to be interesting, as you mentioned in our last podcast. How's this going to play out? It might play out in our hand as we see it actually, in real life, the horrors of all that in real life. Maybe we'll see a swing to the right. But part of this, we also saw. Where'd my document go? Another study that came out on worldview from the Family Research Council. I feel like I'm doing a baby dedication. Feedback here. Oh, here we go. This is the headline. Churchgoers' biblical worldview clarity plummets, embracing socialist and social issue shifts. This was the Arizona Christian University's Cultural Research Center revealed a crisis among regular churchgoers. 47% now lack or are uncertain of a biblical worldview. That was up from 38% in 2023, with only 11% truly holding a biblical worldview. And this is what's even more concerning. I guess one gives rise to the other. Now we're finding a rising sympathy for socialism, with 35% of Christians having a positive view of socialism. That's up 12%. And a softening on issues like LGBT affirmation with 28%. And that, again, these are not like ungodly people. These are people that go to church every Sunday, which is absolutely horrifying. Also, confusion, heightened confusion over Israel. Of course, that's an issue that's really in the forefront right now. And family sanctity. So, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, when the church does not do her job in preaching from the pulpit and training and discipling and being clear about these issues, then people start swinging towards socialism. What do you think is the attraction for Christians as it relates to socialism? I mean, what does it promise?
So much attraction, because a lot of people think the New Testament church is like a socialistic society.
Right.
I mean, it's like, well, got together, you all put your money together in the pot and sold their own land. I'm losing my personal property. I'm giving the land away.
To the poor, yep.
And give it to the poor, and everyone lives together, kumbaya, in the commune and all that. It's a very, very shallow, superficial perspective on the New Testament without considering the deeper doctrine, the deeper implications, and what does that look like, and the pictures of God's character in the New and Old Testament to put together. I could totally see that.
Yep.
But also there's a lack of understanding and study of how socialism and Marxism has behaved in history in the past, and what that has looked at atrocity and the people have murdered and killed in the past. Like, again, is avoidance of that. I'm pretty sure if you go to some of these nations, some of the ethnic churches that came from countries that's been devastated by socialism and communism, they probably don't feel the same way.
Yeah.
Because they have a more refreshed memory of what socialism and communism has done.
And I just saw from the Catholic bishops, whatever group, I don't have the official title in front of me, but talk about a little bit of like moral schizophrenia. They came out originally saying that censoring Trump's border policies, that somehow he's not doing it in a godly way or whatever, and his deportation. Now, it's interesting. They were silent during all the other presidents' deportation and didn't seem to talk about it then, but now they're talking about it, and they're condemning what's happening, which we would say is just simply the rule of the law and trying to actually close our borders and actually have a nation. So they're very like globalistic, leaning on that. But then they also came out and got one right, in my opinion. They actually came out with a statement censuring the whole LGBT transgender genital mutilation stuff, which should be a no-brainer for Christians. But so anyway, so there's just this kind of mixed message coming out of the Vatican on some of these issues. And I know, not that that's important in our world, but it's important in a lot of the world of Catholic believing folks. So anyway, we are having, and this is kind of our first even announcement of this, but on February the 8th, we are hosting the Family Research Council's Institute for a Biblical Worldview, an event right here to equip people on these worldview issues. And one of the speakers, and we'll give out more information on this as we get into the new year, But one of the speakers is Joseph Backholm. And Joseph's an incredible, insightful thinker on a lot of biblical worldview issues and cultural issues. And I saw this on a post, and maybe we could spend the remaining time that we have kind of going through this. But he actually posted why communism/socialism, which is government control or ownership over the means of production, is a bad thing. And let's just walk through these. He got about 10 things listed here, and I thought they were really, really succinct and really powerful. First of all, he says socialism misunderstands human nature and implies that people will be virtuous as long as they have enough money. And then ironically assumes everyone with money is sinister. So again, you see the dichotomy there, the incongruity. But let's talk about that. Is it true that if we just have our physical needs met, everybody's going to live happily ever after?
No, and even the premise that you have enough money, what does enough money mean? That itself is a misnomer. There's to someone who have no virtue. So you're saying they don't have virtue once they have enough money. So you're saying they don't have virtue in the beginning. To someone who don't have virtue, there's never enough money. So that's empty in itself.
My mind races back to not too long ago when we saw those on the left that were suggesting that ISIS was chopping the heads off of Christians because there were not enough job opportunities in their country because of climate change. So it's all this crazy, crazy thing. But it's very clear that money does not change a person's heart. Money does not lead ultimately to lasting happiness. And so therefore, trying to spread out money around everybody is not going to raise the level of corporate joy.
I do think there is a merit to the fact that if you want a stable society, you want most young men to have good paying job that they can support their family and buy a home and stuff like that. That is true on that level. I do believe in general stasis, but I feel like this statement is taking it way too far. It's like, oh, you'll be virtuous to have enough money. It's like, no, that's not how this works.
Not true. Second point he makes, it takes from capable people and gives it to less capable people, ensuring that resources won't ever be used productively. Now, my goodness, this is as true as the nose on your face. DEI, all of the Doge things, found out all the corruption, and even now with the SNAP benefits, I appreciate the fact that we're looking at doing a reset because there's so much fraud. There are people that are able-bodied people who simply don't want to work, and so when we penalize, like we're seeing in Chicago with the mayor, where he's penalizing people who are productive, and it's all under the guise of paying your fair share, right? To give to people who are not productive. And overall, that does not work well in the long run. Third point here, it destroys competition and consequently destroys innovation. Talk about that a little bit. How does socialism destroy competition and innovation?
Well, if you can't win or everyone gets a trophy, why even fight? Why even work hard? And if you don't get rewarded for your innovation, if I can work as hard to create this patent and someone else just takes it from me or state-owned, I am not going to work super hard.
Or the money that you made off of it gets taken from you through excessive taxation and redistributed. Why bother?
I would never work hard. Human innovation does not reward that. I wouldn't work super hard when I know that whatever I work hard, you're going to take anyways.
Right.
So why would I'm going to go and goof off my friends like everyone else. Why am I studying, working hard to create this new thing? Won't happen.
Yep. Fourth point here, destroys people's incentive to be productive by denying them the benefit of their labor.
What we just talked about.
Yeah, it always produces fewer, lower quality products. Again, why innovate? Why work hard? Number 5, it assumes I have the right to other people's property just because they have more than I do. It depends on and incentivizes greed. Talk about that. What is the biblical understanding of taxation? Like, because you make more money than I make, does that mean you have to pay more taxes than me because you have to do your fair? Is that a fair share?
A biblical understanding is a flat tax, and private property is biblical. That's why you talk about this.
Okay,
before.
and back to flat tax.
Yeah.
So if you're making $1 million and I'm making 100,000, a flat tax would say we're both going to pay the same percentage.
10%, 15%, whatever.
So of course,
it is.
10% of $1 million is going to be more than 10% of 100,000. Right. But it's the same. It's equal in the sense it's the same percentage. It's not you're going to pay at a higher tax bracket because you're more successful. That's actually robbing people's personal property and their hard work, and that's actually immoral.
Right.
It's amazing how socialists make it sound moral, but it's actually immoral.
But it's the same thing with private property. Socialism is saying there's no private property, but the Bible clearly talks about private property. That's why you can't steal.
And that's one of the 10 commandments,
Yep.
right? And you can't covet your neighbor's property. All right. Number 6, this is a good one. Denies people the dignity of having what they earn and earning what they have. In other words, there's something, I remember when I had my first job. You remember your first job? I remember when I got the first paycheck. I was so excited because that paycheck represented like actually going out, I'm working hard, and that first paycheck seemed like $1 million to me. And I had resources. I could do whatever I wanted with that paycheck. I could go out and buy something that I wanted. I could save it. I could do whatever I wanted. If I wanted to go to Dairy Queen and buy a milkshake, I had money to go buy a milkshake. There's something very rewarding about working hard and then being able to keep what you earn and being able to do what you want with that. And of course, socialism robs people of that dignity. The next one, it assumes that people engaged in commerce always operate with corrupt motives, but people in government never do. That is so true. Yep. The people criticizing the free market the loudest are the people whose paychecks come from government and from those who they're taxing. And they always ascribe to themselves a very high degree of ethics and nobility. And then they always accuse anybody involved in the corporate world or business world or entrepreneurs of being somehow shady in their, in their motives. So they disparage, again, profit. Profit's an evil thing. They associate it with greed and all these other kinds of things. And yet, of course, those of us working in government never, like Nancy Pelosi, are robbing people blind through insider trading and so forth. Number 8, while claiming to decentralize power, it always centralizes power in the handful of a few bureaucrats. So let's talk about that one. Because what we hear is, democracy, power to the people. And the left's biggest chant is you're destroying democracy, which is, rulership by the people, voice of the people, vote by the people. But at the same time, socialism actually creates a massive hierarchy of people who are the ones that have to run the system, right? Someone's got to be at the top of the heap to run the system. So it's still going to have a centralization of power, and it's still going to create an elite class. It's just going to impoverish everybody else equally in the process.
Right.
Number 9, it assumes it's always unjust for one person to have more than another, when real justice means the dishonest and unskilled shouldn't have as much as the honest and the skilled. No, that sounds so lack of compassion for the lefties. But talk about that a little bit from a biblical perspective. Well, is it unjust for somebody to have more than another person?
Yeah, so DEI is basically saying we're gonna spread out the jobs or the opportunities based on traits besides simply how skilled or how competent you are. And what this is saying is, no, none of those factors, your skin color, your gender, none of this should matter. What should matter is specific to the job, how competent you are, how well fit to the job you have. And that is the most just way. So, to me, if I'm selecting for a position, I'm looking for functionality. I'm looking at what's the best fit for that position. And to me, the most fair is based on their fit to that position. Anything besides that is the extraneous factor. So,
well, and I always crack up when I hear some of the gals in the WNBA demanding, financial justice and financial equity, that the lead star in the WNBA is not making as much as LeBron James in the NBA. It's like a fundamental lack of understanding of basic economics, right? You understand that there's a product there, that's generating a certain amount of income, that if you're the best in that economy, you're going to make more than if you're the best in this economy. That it's not about gender, it's about pure supply and demand. These are like basic things. If you train yourself and you go off to 4 years of school to get trained in whatever it is, say you become a doctor, you're a heart surgeon, you have just added value to yourself. Somebody else decided they didn't want to go to school. They wanted to sit at home on the couch and play video games. Well, you added value to your life. This person hasn't added value to their life. And of course, you're going to demand greater return on your investment than this person because you've taken the skills that God's given you and you've done something with them. You can't justify laziness. You can't justify sloth. You can't justify people that don't have a vision for their life. And you can't, but you can't steal from somebody who's working really, really hard and give it to somebody who's not and expect that that's justice or that that's going to create a society that encourages that guy to do anything with his life.
I would even say someone who maybe don't work as hard as me, but they're just more talented and more skilled, and they get the job and they get the position, they get the raise. I can't argue against that. They're more effective at the job than me. You know, like in NBA, I can work as hard as anyone ever. I'm not going to make an NBA. I don't have the height, I don't have the size, I don't have the explosiveness. So
you got a good outside shot, though.
Yeah, but
you can't jump
over the guy.
I
can't jump. So am I going to get mad that I'm not in the NBA because I work hard? No, because they have more competent skill. The limiting factor is the competency and skill at the very end, and not these other factors, not because of equity and whatever. Can you imagine NBA if they practice DEI and equity? A bunch of Asian guys in there. How many people are watching?
Well, this is a really good point, and I've heard this argument. You know, I've heard it's on all the social media now where people are attacking Jewish people for being successful or for being bankers or for, whatever. And the argument is, how come nobody's attacking black people for taking over the NBA?
Yeah.
I mean,
football. Yeah.
I mean, they're good athletes. And nobody goes, oh, well, you need to have a few more white guys, or how about a few Mexicans in the mix, or let's throw some Chinese folks in there.
Yeah.
It's silly. We don't do that. Certain people have focused on certain things, and they're very, very good at it. The other situation was, one guy was talking about in the inner city, everywhere you go and you find a 7-Eleven, it's usually owned by an Indian immigrant. And he says, are we gonna penalize them? Say, you guys have this collusion thing going on, you're taking over all the 7-Elevens. No, they have learned how to start those businesses and run those businesses effectively. But we're very selective in how we, apply justice and the motives behind people. And I think those are some good examples. Last point here, and then I know my co-host here has to run. How come you're so busy? You should be able to sit here with me and talk all day long. All right. It assumes humanity's natural state is prosperity and rages over the fact that we aren't all rich, when in reality, the natural state is poverty, and capitalism is the only reason we aren't all poor. I like this. When you're raised in a country like America, you assume that everybody in the world has brand new, Michael Jordan sneakers and has the latest iPhone, and spends, $50 a day getting lattes at Starbucks. That is so unrealistic. And the irony of what happens is, after you live in prosperity like we do in America for so long, you start to get entitled and you start to think the whole world's like you, and you're so persecuted because you can't get the latest of whatever, or you actually have to go get a job, when most of the world lives in abject poverty. It is only those countries that have been impacted by a Christian worldview and by a capitalistic free market understanding of economics that has led to an incredible blessing. All of Western Europe, I think of North America, South America, Canada, countries that have embraced capitalism have experienced lift. Cultures that don't live in abject poverty. Look at the 1040 window where the gospel is yet to penetrate. Go look at so many parts of India today, and we travel around the world. You look at Muslim countries. You got the oil execs that have benefited from the oil, and then you got the absolute impoverished, which is most of the other people. That's the norm. And so I think we've got to do something to wake people up to the fact that there's a reason why these Marxists are all on iPhones and drinking lattes at Starbucks while they talk about tearing down the system. Well, you're going to tear down the system, and what are you going to have when you tear down the system? You're going to have nothing but poverty, because that is the condition of the world prior to the entrance of Christianity and capitalism. So we got to, I don't know how else we pop people's bubble than let them experience the fruits of Marxism for themselves.
It's powered by greed. So we talked about this before. Yep. It's powered by greed. Wait, I have an iPhone. You have the newest iPhone. So it's not fair. Why should you have the newest iPhone when I have the old iPhone? And then we keep coming out. I'm nothing against iPhone. My point is, we live in a greed-driven culture.
Yep.
We live in a fear of missing out culture. And that spurs we call it socialism, we'll call it equity, but really it's just wait, why should he have it when I don't have it? That's a very real spirit in America today.
And Marxism festers that, because that's like the gasoline for the engine. If you don't create unrest, if you don't create envy, if you don't create that sense of entitlement, like who are you? How come you have more? If you don't separate people by classes, the haves, the have-nots, if you don't call people names and demonize people that have more than you come up with these cute slogans like the rich need to do their fair share. Again, where does government get the idea that it can just go and steal through taxation whatever it wants to redistribute it among people who have done nothing to earn it or deserve it? But this is what happens when we lose our biblical worldview. We lose a sense of justice. Remember in the Bible, in the parable of the talents, and we'll end with this. But the one who buried the talent didn't get a snap card so they could go out and feed themselves. Jesus called them wicked, and Jesus called them lazy. Now, again, we're not saying that everybody that is on a government program getting some type of aid doesn't deserve it. There are certainly reasons that the government can come along and help, but even there, it's been a usurping of the church's authority and primary responsibility to care for poor people in a context of accountability, which we don't seem to have when government does it. So these are things we've got to recover. I'm excited that we're trying to be intentional, and we're still, saying, Lord, show us what we can do to be a part of the larger solution as we train and equip people here with a biblical worldview. But I really feel like we need to probably dive in more to what does biblical capitalism look like and why is it so valuable. But I appreciate Mr. Backholm giving us 10 amazing points as to why socialism doesn't work and why it does not come out of a biblical worldview. So any final comments on that?
Oh, well said.
I do like that one sweater that you're wearing today, and I don't have one of those. I feel like I'm entitled that you would share it, or maybe Christmas is coming up. Could you buy me one?
I got it just because how cold this room was from last time.
Yeah, and did you notice I brought a space heater today? You guys can't see it because we got it off camera, but I was thinking of my friend here, and I was thinking about myself a lot too. But anyway, Lord help me for my selfishness. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday. Until then, have an amazing week.